Nashville might be the country music capital of the world, but in addition to guitars and banjos, they also love their pigskins and jockstraps. They like sport, is what I'm trying to say. Here are the stadiums and arenas of Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville Municipal Auditorium. From outside, this might just look like one of those typical big, boring domes of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. However, it does have a few distinguishing features. Firstly, it's situated on Gay Street. So, that's something. Also, it was the first indoor sports venue in the area to feature air conditioning. It gets pretty warm in Nashville, so that's good. And underneath the court is the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum. There's a lot going on here. Having said that, the main sporting tenant at this arena is an arena football team, so I can't imagine the attendance figures at this place are mind-blowing. Perhaps its best days are behind it. First Horizon Park. This place was built on the site of Sulphur Dell, a ballpark that opened way back in 1885. I suppose it's a bit of a shame that the old place had to go, but First Horizon Park is no letdown. Also, having sulphur in the name probably meant lower sales of hot dogs. It's just a bit off-putting. It seems that there's no separation between sports and music in Nashville, as the team that plays here is called the Nashville Sounds. And more remarkably, the scoreboard looks like a giant acoustic guitar. I suppose it's technically an electric guitar. There should be more novelty scoreboards out there. I know there's one in the shape of Texas somewhere, probably Texas, but not that many others. I guess it would cost several $1,000,000 more compared with an off-the-shelf Jumbotron from Best Buy. Also, the shape would have to be close-ish to a rectangle. I don't think a clarinet-shaped video board would be that effective. Other than that though, it's a great modern ballpark in its own right. Nissan Stadium. Nashville's little bro, Knoxville, might have one of the top 10 biggest stadiums in the world, but Nashville has the second biggest Nissan Stadium in the world, so who's to say which is the more impressive brag? In case you were wondering, the biggest Nissan Stadium is in Yokohama, the home of Nissan, or Nissan I should say. Another thing that this has over Knoxville is that it's home to an NFL team. It's also the part-time home of a college team, albeit an FCS team. That was actually one of the preconditions of the city providing funding towards the stadium's construction. In terms of its design, it's certainly not the most unique one out there. In fact, it is rather similar to Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, which opened 1 year prior, just with a more curved rather than angular seating arrangement. One aspect that is unique is that below the video board at either end, the concourse opens up and there are these cute little houses, some of which house concessions, others restrooms. Allen Arena. Before we even step inside, I want to mention that at night time the exterior of this place can change to all sorts of different colours, as you can see here. I guess the power is out at the moment. The South is known for being religious, because it is, and that is reflected by the fact that this place hosts more chapel services than it does basketball games. They're daily, I believe. Lipscomb University was after all founded back in 1891, as the Nashville Bible School. Anyway, the interior looks great in my opinion, and no, it's not just those purple seats that I like, but also these, I like the vocabulary to tell you what they are, but those white board things up top create a more cozy feel. Hale Stadium is affectionately known as the Hole. Not the Hale, but the Hole. It's actually a somewhat common name for college football stadiums, but I still think the best example of it is the Hole in Grambling, Louisiana, because it's basically a hole in the ground. This one, not so much. Although from the time that Nissan Stadium was built in the early 2010s, the Tigers played entirely at Nissan Stadium, and so this place was neglected, and maybe at some point it really was a hole, in the pejorative sense of the word. Now the Tigers play some of their games here on campus, and it's been kept in pretty good condition. Nearby is Gentry Center, which is about as dull as you can get on the outside. However, once you're inside, you'll see a very interesting, quirky, old school arena. Along the sidelines there are 3 levels of seating, some fixed, some retractable. The lower tier tapers off in the corners, which is not something you see too often in an indoor sports venue. And when you combine that with the blue walls and the wooden bench seating at the ends, it makes for a distinctive look. One downside is that center hung scoreboard, which looks like it utilizes the same technology as the 1980s Casio wristwatch. Nashville Super Speedway. Despite the name, this place is situated at a considerable distance from the city centre, in a place called Lebanon, which is over 20 miles away. I could have sworn Lebanon was even further away than that, but I did double check. It's not considered to be a part of the metropolitan area, but it's got Nashville in the name. And in some cities, 20 miles away is the same city, so I'll allow it. I'm sure the people of Nashville are willing to drive out here. Not just because it hosts NASCAR meets, but it really is a super speedway. It's the longest NASCAR track of its kind. The venue was actually closed from 2011 and only opened again in 2021, when it was sold to a different company. Curb Event Center. Given this place is named after a music executive, the late Mike Curb, and the fact that it's situated in Nashville, it's not all that surprising that it was designed to host concerts, and does so. So if your musical act isn't big enough to fill some of the larger arenas in Nashville, you get kicked to the curb, so to speak. However, it does have a permanent sporting tenant, that being the Belmont Bruins. Specifically the men's and women's basketball teams and volleyball as well, I believe. It is after all slap bang in the middle of the Belmont campus. In 2020 it also hosted the first debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. The venue actually had to attain licensed nursing home administrators accreditation in order to host it. First Bank Stadium. This was the temporary home of the Titans whilst Nissan Stadium was being built, but is the permanent home of Vanderbilt, who are a bit of an outlier in the Southeastern Conference, in that they're a school that is known for being not all that into football. I know, it's weird. But you've got to hand it to the fans that do continue to show up knowing that a loss is almost inevitable. Fittingly, their stadium is not the most interesting compared to its counterparts. However, there are some changes taking place. The northern end zone is currently in the process of being redeveloped from a small and simple stand to a multi-story building full of premium seating and more. It will also connect the 2 sides of the concourse for ease of navigation. A similar redevelopment will be taking place at the southern end zone as well, so by next year this place will look very different. Memorial Gymnasium. When it comes to basketball, it's a different story. Not only do the Vols play in a completely unique venue, but their basketball team is actually competitive. The arena's most notable feature is probably the court itself, which is raised above floor level, much like Williams Arena in Minneapolis. A lot of visiting coaches are not a fan of that setup, particularly that the players' benches are at the baseline, not the sideline. But what I really like is the seating layout, which has less in common with a modern basketball arena than it does a traditional British football stadium. It essentially has a standalone stand on each side, and they've been added to over the years. The corners are left without seating, there's just some concrete walls. I mentioned earlier that Nashville Municipal Auditorium was the first arena in the area with air conditioning. Well, this place still doesn't have it. I guess if you can't handle the heat, get out of the gymnasium. Bridgestone Arena is known for its unique architectural features, most notably the rather large tower attached to it. Oddly enough, the actual Bridgestone Tower is just a stone's throw away, although those who live in glass towers shouldn't really throw stones, should they? Come to think of it, it's interesting that a tyre company would sponsor a venue that's primarily known for being rather slippery. But I suppose when people see how slippery things can get, they'll think about their truck's old worn out tyres. Then they'll want to buy some new ones. What brand will first spring to mind? Well played, Firestone, well played. I'm going to buy some Firestone tyres now. It is certainly a lot better than the arena's former name. Nothing wrong with the name Gaylord, but if there's already an arena on Gay Street, it just causes confusion. What else to say? Oh, I like how the video board has the same teeth as the Predator's saber-toothed tiger mascot. That's a nice touch. Situated in the Nashville Fairgrounds is Geodis Park, the latest addition to Nashville's stadium repertoire. It's the purpose-built home of Nashville SC, the city's professional soccer club, who were founded 2 years prior to this stadium's opening. They started off playing at Nissan Stadium. You might be a little surprised to hear that with 30,000 seats, it is the largest soccer-specific stadium in the US and Canada. The size is just one of its positive attributes. I love that brick and steel exterior, which pays homage to the industrial history of the area in which it's located. As for the interior, well, they made it look more like a soccer stadium than a textile mill, which plays the dual purposes of paying homage to soccer, and also you can play soccer in it. The colour scheme in here is a little odd, at least the arrangement is, but I think it looks pretty good overall. Next door is Nashville Fairground Speedway, which is considerably less super than the super speedway that we saw earlier, but at least its title is geographically accurate. Unlike the super speedway, the main stand actually does have a roof sheltering a good portion of the seating. So there is a lot going for it, it's just that it's unable to fly, and thus legally can't refer to itself as super. There are plans to make some improvements to this venue in the near future, so perhaps it will become a super speedway after all. And those were the Stadiums of Nashville. Consider subscribing and all that stuff, and thanks for watching, have a good one.